I don't know why it was on my brain. I guess it was because there are these two beautiful women in the car that I'm just like, I don't know. If it'd been some dudes and just a bunch of
Uh-huh.
dudes, I wouldn't have been worried. But I try to be couth when I can. But I guess going, do I smell y'all? I mean, that just
Oh, Shane, it's so great to have you on the show.
is. You make me smile every time I see you.
Well, I feel the same about you. And it was not that long ago that we met in person. It was so great to meet you in Omaha for the Healthy for a
Yes.
Lifetime conference.
Yes.
And I was so impressed. I remember you were off running before we went to dinner. And then I know that because it was so funny. You had me cracking up like our first conversation because I don't know if you remember, but we were all riding together in the car to go to the vegan restaurant.
Right.
And we get in the car and you said something like, "Do I smell y'all?" And there was like a little bit of silence in the
Oh,
car and all good. And you said, no, I took a shower. It was just that I keep sweating after I
oh,
run or something like that.
yes. Because here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it's like for you when you work out, but it's like if I go for a run and it feels like it's I guess if I do like something like high intensity, like CrossFit, or when I was in Charlotte, I worked at a place called Iron Tribe, and they had showers there. Or if I run, I find I have to have this at least half an hour of cool down time
Uh-huh.
because if I don't, and I just go jump in the shower, it doesn't matter how lukewarm I make it. I get out, I dry off, I feel good, and I'm sweating, and I'm like,
Right.
so
Yeah,
I
you
was
need that
just
buffer. You need that buffer
yes,
period.
I do, and
And you
so
didn't have it.
I didn't have it, and I thought, hopefully, by the time I get down to the lobby and we get in the car and I'm one of those, fortunately, that I don't have to wear, um, um, antiperspirant. I wear deodorant, but I don't
Mhm.
because I don't have a problem with underarm sweat. That's a little TMI, but anyway, um, I don't normally smell, but I was sitting there and it was I don't know why it was on my brain. I guess it was because there are these two beautiful women in the car that I'm just like, I don't know. If it'd been some dudes and just a bunch of
Uh-huh.
dudes, I wouldn't have been worried. But I try to be couth when I can. But I guess going, do I smell y'all? I mean, that just anyway.
It was so great. And then we learned our mutual love
Yes.
of North Carolina and that you lived in Charlotte. And then
Mm,
for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I went to school in Wilmington. And yeah, and then you had me cracking up again. You had the hundreds of people cracking up during your food demo
oh,
with Melissa. That
and
was and you had like it was almost like a sitcom.
well, and here's the funny story about that.
Yeah.
I I guess she had told me how she planned on doing it. I didn't know that she was going to be like. It's funny because that's the first time I'd met Melissa, like personally, and she's very straightforward, got it planned out. She reminds me of my wife because my wife is like that. And I am not like that.
Uh-huh.
I can be a loose cannon sometimes. And so when I saw that she was planning on doing all this stuff and laying it out, I was like, yeah, this is not going how I thought it was going to go. So, um, I could tell it was like she was struggling because I'd be right beside her trying to kind of push her buttons. And boy, she was like I called her laser beam after that because
Mhm.
she's so, but it was so funny because after we kind of got to the green room, you could tell she was a little rattled. But when we came out, it's like everybody thought it was planned.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
everybody thought, "Oh, it's so great that y'all just did that," and I was like, "Yeah, that was totally not part of the." But it was fun because I feel like you have to have that yin and yang with people, and so, but it was so fun, and I was totally like, "She's never gonna ask me to do anything like this again," and so fortunately, she still texts me and we talk,
Oh, good.
and so,
Good.
but
Yeah,
yes.
for a little context for our listeners, this was a conference and Shane and Melissa were doing a food demonstration of Shane's recipe. So, um but the dynamic there, yes, Melissa's very type A. She had everything planned out, and you were up there like scooping dip out of the blender with your finger, and yeah, it was.
Yeah, and I tell you, I felt bad because I didn't realize she said she had everything planned out and laid out the way we were going to do it, and as
Mm,
we made the recipes, she wanted them set up a certain way because she was going to go back and take pictures of each one and post nice
uh,
little pictures. Well, here
yeah.
I am tossing food out to
Yeah.
everybody. Pickles is coming up, and he's getting it and taking it around, and I totally destroyed her layout. But anyway, so it worked out and it was fun. But
It
yeah.
did. It really did work out because yeah, the whole room was so engaged, and yeah, Milton Mills is passing the dip around, even though you had licked it and nobody cared. It was a big family. It felt like a big family in that room.
You know what? I don't know. I think we talked a little bit about this when I interviewed you on the Real Men Eat Plants podcast, but there was something special about that conference.
Hmm.
There
I agree.
was. I mean, it just the camaraderie, even with the speakers, but I mean,
Hmm.
just the people that were there. I hated to leave. I mean,
Yeah.
I really, really did. It was almost there was this sadness to leave. And then when they came to take me to the airport, Esther and her husband were with me, and I don't know that there are two sweeter people on the planet. I mean, so I mean that whole
Really.
weekend and just you know, I, it was just good. And then getting to meet you and then forge a friendship from there. It has just been golly. It just reminds us the world is not that big a place.
Hmm.
When the
Yeah.
stars align and you just kind of have these I feel like that. Do you know Gigi Carter?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, Gigi is one of my dearest friends,
Oh.
and I feel like her relationship reminds me of kind of how you and I have met and started our friendship. We met like at a plant-based immersion weekend, and we were
Mm.
speakers, and it just it was one of those things that just forged, and it's just she and Cersei are two of my favorite people, and so this kind of reminds me of that. Just people
Yeah.
you meet and you feel like did we meet when we were teenagers, and hang out?
Right.
It kind of has that vibe. So anyway,
Totally. Totally. All right. Well, I wanted to start before we dive into your story, and then I'm really excited about what you put as the topic that's inspiring you these days. So I really want to get to that.
okay.
But first, I have a little lightning round, just
Oh,
kind of first thing that comes to your mind, a few
okay.
questions. Okay. I know this is a surprise. So, and I hope it's relevant. Do you listen to music while you're in the kitchen?
All the time.
And if
Yeah.
so, what's a song that gets you fired up to create?
You know what? So I'm a musician, was a musician by trade.
Right.
Um, I'm a little abstract, to be honest with you. I
Honest is good.
I'm very nostalgic. So I listen to music in seasons. So
Hmm.
I have a photography playlist when I'm shooting pictures of recipes, and it's called Mountain Music.
Ah.
And we used to vacation in Boone, North Carolina.
Hmm.
Is our happy place.
Okay.
Our happy place. And there's a little grocery store there called Earth Fare. It's kind of like, are you familiar with Earth Fare? It's kind of like
Mm.
it's a regional local. It's like a Whole Foods, but it was
Okay.
started in Asheville, but it's all over the Eastern Seaboard. Anyway, they had a little one in Boone, and every time we would get to Boone with our family, we would take the kids to the cabin where we were staying, and the older ones would stay with the younger ones. And Andre and I would go down and buy our groceries for the week, and we'd go to Earth Fare. And it has that medicinal smell like at a Whole Foods over by this. I love that, and it's kind of hippie-ish. And they always had like 70s music playing, like James Taylor and dancing in the moonlight. And so every time I go in with my iPhone, I'd hold Shazam up and I'd take
Mm.
and create a playlist.
Ah.
And just Boone is my happy place. So when I first started blogging, when to kind of put me in the mood, I think about the mountain. So I'd play that playlist. And then I have a playlist for the fall, which is just jazz music. And now I have a December. Christmas instrumental 50s, 40s, and 50s. So for me, it's funny because I can't nail down like one song that makes me
Okay.
great. It's seasonal for me. And
Fair.
but like my summer and spring playlist is, like Moon Taxi and Hippocampus and I mean some of the music from the show the Holiday. I mean it's just all over the board. So I have so many playlists. It's like what mood am I in today? And so
Love
I know
it.
that doesn't really answer the question, but it's like there's not one song that depends on the time of year, depends on when I'm working,
No,
and
it
then
paints a
sometimes,
great picture. I love
yeah,
that. Yeah.
some days I watch The Office when I'm cooking. So
Okay.
so
I can see you watching The Office. Okay. A quirk or fun fact that most people don't know about you.
a quirk or a fun fact. Um, golly, um, I have a lot of quirks. Um,
You perspire long after you stop running.
yes, I would say from a kitchen standpoint, I'm not the most, or I'm very organizationally challenged. Um, but I cannot stand a full sink of dishes. And
Mhm.
so, like, my wife is the type A, everything's organized. And so you would think that this would grind her, but she likes, even if we wake up to a clean sink, she likes through the day, if she has, when she has lunch or whatever, to just set a dish in there, even if there's nothing in the sink.
Mm.
And when I come in to cook and start creating, I want clean sinks. And so sometimes we argue. It's like there was nothing in the sink. You had one glass, rinse it out, put it away. She goes, I don't operate that way. And I'm like, you should. And so it's for some reason that is just uh, I don't know why that gets to me. It's like if I see a sink, a glass and a spoon in the sink, I have to wash them and put them away before I start cooking. I have to start with a clean slate.
Mhm. Clean
Then I
slate.
mess everything up, but I have to start with a clean slate. But
Mm.
but I will tell you a fun fact.
Okay.
I don't know if you listen to country music at all.
I just started to actually since starting the sanctuary in Virginia. Yes, I just started
Okay, so if
not too long
I don't
ago.
know if you're familiar with Kenny Chesney, country artist.
Yes.
If you go back and listen to his song from about 15, 20 years ago, there was a song he did called The Good Stuff.
Okay.
The story of that song is about my mother and my mom and dad's relationship. That they were the inspiration for that song.
Really?
Yeah, after my mom died with cancer in 2000, my dad worked at his record label as
Wow.
corporate security. And when my mom was going through chemo, my dad shaved his head.
Mm.
And my dad was real good friends with all these artists. And Kenny had come in and he saw that. And he actually, on his album, has a comment to that. And the songwriters were talking to my dad, and my dad was just telling them all these stories. And, they changed the name and some of the stuff, but my dad brought me the demo from the songwriters and I just bawled because I knew exactly what it was about. But that's a fun fact that I
Wow.
so that song, The Good Stuff by Kenny Chesney, was about my mom and dad. And
Incredible.
yeah.
Wow. That is fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
So you got a quirk and a fun fact.
Well, perfect, because one of my questions, I couldn't decide on all the questions. One was a pet peeve, but I already got that. So, right, we got two more. As a young adult, what did you think about vegans?
Weirdos.
Mhm.
Um, they ate grass and bark and usually didn't take showers
Right.
and were loony lefties that wanted to live in the woods. That was, I mean, literally, that was, or wanted to protest zoos all the time. That
Mhm.
was that was my take.
Yep. And we'll get back to that.
Sure.
All right. Favorite recipe for Super Bowl Sunday? The one that you make year after year
Oh,
that you can't live without. Just one.
just one. It would
Yeah.
have to be my queso.
I knew it.
It's the queso. Yes.
And
So
this recipe is on because this is going to come out before Super Bowl Sunday. So I know you've got probably many recipes,
yes,
but the
yes.
queso is a
It's on
must.
there. Yeah, it's
Okay.
on the queso. I tell people that is one of the best transition. You take that to any Super Bowl party, and my brother's not vegan at all, but that's his favorite cheese dip. So
Amazing. Okay, cool. All right. So I do want to spend a few minutes kind of talking about your journey to plant-based living. I know you grew
Sure.
up in rural Mississippi on bologna sandwiches. You were an athlete, and then you
Yep.
went to college football on a scholarship, and you were also a musician as a starting point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it, anything else you wanted to mention from the beginning, but then about
Sure.
your health journey after that.
Okay. I mean, there's where you want me to start?
Yeah, maybe I mean, did I get like the very quick summary of growing up?
I mean, that's yeah. I mean, I grew up in rural Mississippi, was very athletic, um, played baseball early on. That was my main sport, and was never overweight as a kid. Um, then as I got into junior high, I played football and fell more in love with football. But I was a kicker and played other positions, but I loved kicking, and so got into that and ended up started drawing a lot of attention from colleges. And my right after my football season in my junior year, my dad was a highway patrolman, a state trooper in Mississippi, and we found out uh, right before I started my junior year he was going to get transferred from Boonville is up in North Mississippi around Tupelo, so it's close to the Tennessee and Alabama lines. And he was getting transferred to Jackson, the capital, to go to work for the governor's staff. Like the highway patrol kind of has like a secret service branch. They provide protection for the governor. And so he was getting transferred there. So we moved Christmas of my junior year, and I ended up graduating there, played football down there, got a lot of attention. And so originally went to college on a football scholarship. And I'd been a musician since I could walk. And I ended up leaving college after my sophomore year and moving to Nashville to pursue music. And when I got to Nashville, I think, I'm 6'1", 6'2". I think I weighed 185 pounds, still very svelte and but when I didn't have a football coach or a strength and conditioning coach making me do something, I got very lazy very quickly. And I think I was 20 when I moved to Nashville, and I got married at 26. I had met my wife, got married, and by the time I got married, I went from over 6 years, I went from 185 pounds to 240 pounds on my wedding day. And I left Nashville 2005 and moved. That's when I moved to Charlotte, and I was a music director at a church in Charlotte and did that for the next 15 years. But from '05 to golly, from '05 until 2013, then I got to 300 pounds.
And I'm curious before we get into the health, in terms of your music.
Sure.
Did you see was your goal to be a professional musician for the rest of your life? Like, and how did that? I'm just
Oh
very
yeah.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved I still do. So I was a guitar player and a singer and wanted to be a songwriter. So I ended up my goal was to I wanted to get a record deal. I wanted to write songs. I wanted to tour. I wanted to be a big artist. I originally had moved to Nashville to do contemporary Christian music, and I ended up getting a publishing deal with Sony Music. And so I started writing for them as a publisher, as a songwriter. And I ended up getting asked to play guitar on people's demos and a couple and then independent projects, and then getting hired as a guitar player to go out on the road with some different country artists and Christian artists. So I started to make a living as a side musician, and so had a couple publishing deals. And so my goal was to just kind of in some way support myself playing music,
Mhm.
and did for a while.
Mhm.
And so that was the goal originally. And then when iTunes came along,
Mm.
basically we saw what happened to the music industry, what happened to the housing market back in '07 when all that crashed, and that's what happened to the music industry. And so everything went completely soft. Artists stopped touring because they were like, we nobody's, everybody was buying CDs, and now they
Mhm.
go to buying one song on iTunes.
Mhm.
And they artists stopped touring, they weren't cutting records, they were trying to regather themselves and figure out how to navigate this. And so guys like me who were starting to come up, make a name for ourselves, well, if you can have this AAA session player that everybody knows play on your records that played for Shania Twain and Alan Jackson, and all of this, or do you want Shane Martin? Well, they can get this guy for the same thing they were paying me. And so that's kind of what happened.
Got it.
And so anyway, we kind of, we got hit really hard
Yeah.
financially. And so I went from flying on planes and driving on tour buses and playing in the studio to delivering pizza at night and radiators during the day. So
Mm.
it's true what they say with music, it's feast or famine. Nobody makes a median living doing
Mhm.
music. So
Mhm. And
um,
how did that how did you deal with that emotionally?
it was hard,
Yeah.
because for me as a musician, it's not just what you do. You're creative.
Right.
It's you don't just create. I mean, it's who you are. And when you're not able to do it, and then when you've done it at a certain level, it's very humbling when it all gets knocked out from under you. And what made it even tougher is I had a wife and two new children at home, and it was hard. We went through some struggles even in our marriage early on because, I was dealing my mom had died in 2000. We got married in 99, and so I was dealing with depression from my mom dying. I was very close with my mom, and when the music thing happened, I I it got to a point where, I was making $8.50 an hour delivering radiators during the day, and then I would go deliver pizza 4 or 5 nights a week, and it was exhausting.
Mhm.
And my wife was a graphic designer, but her goal when we started having kids, she said, "I wanna be home with our children. That's where my heart is." So we were living and so we had some friends that let us move into a garage apartment that they had finished out to house aging parents eventually, and they offered that to us, and we were able to move in and live rent free for a year to kind of me get on, sup supporting them on my income. And then we found a little house out in Ashland City, Tennessee, and we were paying $500 a month. It was a little bitty two-bedroom house, and it was sweet, and I had a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and they
Mm.
shared a room, and somehow we got on Dave Ramsey, and so that was kinda how we survived. Everything was
Mhm.
cash, and it was a sweet time, but it was tough. And then I think I got to the point where one night I remember I didn't even tell my wife. I said, "I can't do this anymore. They 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 need me to provide for them." And so I got online one night, got on monster.com, and Dell Computer had
Mm.
moved to Nashville about a year or 2 earlier, and they were hiring salesmen. And, I applied, did a phone interview, got another interview, went in and got hired through a corporate temp agency, and, basically had 6 months to hit certain metrics, and then Dell would bring you on full time. And then I ended up getting hired full time by Dell and went to work for them and was one of their top salesmen in home sales for a little while. And we were starting to breathe. And then that's and so I gave up music and told my wife I'm gonna go and do this. And then I think probably in the next that was like November, December of '04. And then in March of '05, this church in Charlotte called and wanted to interview me, and we went out, and Andrea was elated because if we got the job, it would still be a decent salary. But we never anticipated leaving Nashville and moving that far away from our families. But she didn't want me to give music up to that
Mhm.
point,
Mhm.
and so this was a way to stay into it. And anyway, long story short, we ended up that's how we ended up in Charlotte in
Got it.
'05. And it was great for our family. And but kind of that's the long way of answering your question. Like, it really took the wind out of my sails.
Mhm.
There were a lot of struggles, but I do tell people this: as hard as it was, um, there were some sweet times in there with my wife and my kids at the time, who were my 2 oldest were that little, and I see, you always think you could do things differently or navigate things differently, but I'm a big believer that things work out the way they are supposed to work out, and we just, we have to rest in that and not resist it. And
Mhm.
that doesn't mean you don't fight it. It doesn't mean that you don't break down and that you're not honest and that you're not open, but it's pointless to resist it, because I'm not a fatalist by any stretch of the imagination, but I just think that when these things come, there's a purpose.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you just have random happenstance, which has no purpose, and it's that I can't accept that,
Mhm.
and so I look back and I see how it made us better, it strengthened us, and it just really. Somebody told me, I heard a lyric from a song the other day, and I was talking about this last week, that said, "There's no one more thankful to sit at a table than the one who best remembers hunger's pain."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so when these hard times come and these moments, it it really is like a gut punch, but then you look back and it just makes you appreciate things going forward.
Absolutely.
So,
Always.
yeah.
Always. So meanwhile, you at this point in time, you were gaining weight. So getting back to
Yes.
the health.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. So my eating habits didn't change at all. And so I just continued to gain weight. And when we got to Charlotte, Charlotte's pretty health conscious. I mean, it's kind of like a mini Europe, so to speak. I mean, everybody rides bikes and everybody runs and swims. Swimming's huge there, even in the high schools. And the pastor I worked for was like, he was like Mr. Biker, and that kind of thing. And he was 12, 15 years older than me, and maybe older than that. Yeah, 15, 20 years older than me. And so, but he's riding bikes and he's out, doing all this. And here I am coming in, and you can tell that I'm the one that's not from Charlotte, kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And he said, "I want you to go see my doctor. You need to have a physical. You need to have a physical." And his name was Neil Spate. I never will forget him. And he was an MD, but he definitely tried to operate on a more holistic, like trying to get people to change their lifestyle and things like that. So I went, had a physical, and about 2, 3 weeks later, I got a letter from his office, and it had all my numbers in it. And I was probably 35, 36, and I was about 280 pounds, and my glucose was way up. I was like sorry, my dog's barking. Um, my I was a pre-diabetic. My cholesterol was like over 400,
Oh.
fatty liver, um, extremely high blood pressure, hypertension, the whole thing. And he said, "I need to see you. I want to see you." And so I guess that was like 2007, 2008. And I did what every concerned patient did. I didn't go back. I didn't even respond, because I was like, if I don't go, he won't find anything. But that was
And
stupid,
I mean,
because
but
he
you
already.
saw the numbers.
Yes,
You
yeah.
saw the numbers and somehow you talked yourself into thinking that if you didn't address it, then what?
Uh, I I think, for me, it just was. I guess after I saw my mom die, there was always this fear of findings. There was this thing,
Mhm.
and I can't explain. It was like finding something,
Mhm.
and there's this idea that if I don't go, they won't find anything,
Right.
and so I just didn't go back. And and it's funny because I think everybody thinks you've got cancers and things like that, but the thing that kills most Americans is heart disease.
Yep.
Overwhelmingly, it's not even
Mhm.
and a lot of people don't even realize that one of the leading causes of death from smoking is not lung cancer, it's heart disease.
Mhm.
And so, I just kinda hid the paper, and my wife found it and she goes, What are you doing? You know, because my wife, even before we were plant based, she was a very healthy, conscious eater. Like, you know, lots of salad, lots of vegetables. And if she had meat, it was more like a side or just
Mhm.
a part of it, you know? And so I put that in the drawer and just ignored it. And that was, like I said, around 2007, 2008, and went on for another few years. So
Wow. Another few years without going back to the doctor, without addressing it. And then what was the turnaround?
so we had moved from Charlotte to Atlanta. I had taken a job there, and it was just absolutely terrible. It was horrible. We had no business moving there. And that job lasted maybe about 18 months. And then, you know, we have 4 kids by this time. And um, super stressed, super, you know, just dealing with the situation. And I started to get staph infections that
Mm,
wouldn't heal. Like I
mm,
would get them, get on some penicillin, antibiotics, get rid of them, and they would come back. And I mean, I was getting them on my lower back, like right above my butt right there, and they were just painful. And I had I started to develop like the dark patches under the arms and stuff, like you know,
mhm,
signs of a diabetic. And we left. I got a job in Opelika, Alabama, right outside of Auburn, where the university is. And we were starting to kind of see things turn around for us a little bit, you know, get our feet back under us after the catastrophe in Atlanta. And my son was playing baseball, and at this time he was like 6 or 7. Yeah, 7 or 8. Anyway, I was out one night helping the team, you know, play. I was a former baseball player. Of course, I was still big as a house. And one of the kids hit a ball, and it wasn't rolling that hard, but it hit a rock and it bounced up and hit me in the shin. I went, "Ow, that hurt." In about 2 days, it swelled up and I got a staph infection again. And it was so painful. I didn't want to go to the doctor. I kept, you know, putting heat on it and everything. And it was terrible. So finally I went to the doctor, and they had to do the whole lancing it and all of that kind of stuff. And I went over to Target to get my medication. I had to get on an antibiotic, and it was hurting so bad that I had to get on one of those little motorized carts.
mhm,
And I was riding through Target, and I drove by a mirror, and I had to back up to try to get my medication. And I think that's the first time that it hit me like something has to change,
mm,
because this is not just a precursor to the future. This is the present. This is my reality right now, and it doesn't get better. On If I keep doing what I'm doing, it doesn't get better. And I just remember getting back to my car and going home and just go, I don't even know where to go, but I have to do something. And I had done diets in the past. I'd done, you know, counting fat grams. I had done keto, or not keto. Yeah, keto, or, you know, the Atkins diet
sure, yeah,
and stuff like that. And I would lose weight quickly, but I'd gain it back quicker.
mhm,
So, the staph infection, it got healed, and I remember it. I was in Winn-Dixie with my wife and 2 of my kids, and my daughter, Maddie, who's the oldest, was with me, and I just kinda checked my blood pressure just for the heck of it, and it came back, like, even on that little machine, it was like 160 over 110. I mean, it was just stupid, and my daughter goes, "Daddy," like, you know, and I was like, "Don't tell your mom, don't tell your mom."
mm,
But then that's when it's like when your kids are like 11 years old, and she looks and they get that that's not good, that hit me in the heart.
mhm,
And I realized Andrea had not been wanting me to change and get healthy because she was ashamed of the way I looked. She literally was concerned for me.
mm,
And so I would say that was probably the turning point. And I woke up one morning on a Sunday morning, and I looked in the mirror, and my face is red and I'm puffy and tight. And I got on the scale, and I was like right there at 300, like 298 or whatever it was. And I went to church that day, and I got home and I called a buddy of mine, and I'd seen a mutual friend of ours from Nashville who was on the Iron Man Facebook page. He was being interviewed, and he was talking about how he lost a friend to a disease, and he decided to get healthy, and he ended up going plant-based. And I said, "Hey man, I saw this thing with Thad. He's lost like 80 pounds, man. He looks incredible." And my buddy Jason, because I couldn't get a hold of Thad, he said, "Yeah, man, Thad went vegan." And I just went, "Well, I'm not doing that." And he said,
Those
"Look," he
stinky
said,
people.
"Yes, yes." And he said, "Go watch Forks Over Knives." I still remember it was January 19th. It was a
Wow.
Sunday, January 19th. He said, "Just watch Forks Over Knives." So Sunday night, my wife and I sit down and watch that documentary, and I went cold turkey the next day because I
Mm,
thought, wait a minute, because it was the first time that I didn't feel attacked by. I always felt attacked by vegans. You
mhm.
know, like it always had to be about the environment or the animals first.
Uh-huh.
And those things, it's not that those things aren't important, but if I'm 300 pounds and can't get off the couch, I can't do anything for anybody if I don't take care of me first. And so my wife and I watched it. And I think the thing that blew me away about Forks Over Knives was it was all about the health. It was
Yeah.
all about disease. It was all about your family. It was all about cooking and eating. And I remember looking at my wife going, I could totally, they're eating, because they were eating things, you know, that you're told don't eat potatoes, don't eat pasta, don't eat breads. And they're saying, eat it, you know? And so we didn't know where to start cooking. We didn't know how, but the next day we kind of just started on our journey together. And for the first 2 weeks, we said, this is daddy's food. This is everybody else's. And then we're like, that's not going to work. And so we just said in the house, everybody's doing it. And two or three of my kids already had dairy allergies from birth. So they
Mm,
were on soy milk anyway and no dairy. So
amazing.
that was kinda it, and then in 2 weeks, I lost 20 pounds, but I was
Wow.
never hungry. I mean, I was eating, and then in 3 months, I lost 55 pounds and had a physical for life insurance because I wouldn't even go get, because I don't think we coulda got insured,
Mhm.
and that's when I remember I said, "This is gonna be the telltale sign. It's either gonna be if I don't see results, I'm done," you know? They did our blood work, and my blood pressure went from the last time I had it checked with a doctor was like 153 over 106. When after 3 months of going plant-based, my blood pressure was 126 over 79, which in the South was great, but in
Uh-huh.
3 months, that's a huge turnaround.
Sure.
And my cholesterol went from over 400 to 199. So I was below 200.
Oh,
Um, there was no trace of diabetes anywhere in my system. Um, Just everything reversed, and that's when I
incredible.
went, "This is legit." And that's it, I'm not going back. So, been there ever since.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. It was
uh,
like you committed, your family got on board, and that was it, no turning around.
yeah, and it was hard the first 2 weeks. We were eating tofu and salads and didn't know how to fix anything, but then it
Right.
was like we found this whole underground. I found Rip Esselstyn, I saw a
Uh-huh.
TED Talk, and it blew me away what plant-based was. Like, he was showing these peanut butter chocolate chip cookies for a dessert, and we were making meatloafs with lentils and oats, and I was like, "Wait a minute, I can still have mashed potatoes. I just need to add almond milk and some seasoning, and there doesn't have to be all the butter and
Mhm.
corn and just and so I was like, it was, and so after 2 weeks finding recipe, and I found his book in the library there, the, Engine 2 diet, so I got all the recipes, and it was, yeah, that's been it ever since, and then I got passionate about it, and that the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, yeah, and at what point did you start to realize that you were so passionate that you wanted to create a a business, a blog, a business,
Yeah,
yeah.
um, it was weird because, we started having people reach out, even family going, "What are you doing?"
Mhm.
Because, a lot of people when they lose weight, they don't look healthy. They may look sunken, or, because, and that's what people need to realize. Losing weight does not mean you're healthy.
Right.
Um, it's healthier than carrying a lot of weight, but diets are deprivation. They're not feeding yourself. And so I didn't look deprived. That was what I was,
Mhm.
vibrant. I'm not tired in the day, and so people were calling and asking, and I was sharing recipes with them and talking with them, and I'm a I'm an extrovert by nature, but I love talking with people. I love sharing stories. I love hearing stories. And I remember my wife telling me, she said, "You ought to start a blog." She said, because I knew she followed bloggers and things like that. And
Mhm.
she goes, "You know, a lot of them get paid and sponsors if they have a big enough following." And so she said, "You ought to consider that." And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be fun." I knew when I got passionate about the food and I was watching, and I followed Rip like all the time. Like Rip was still is one of my heroes. And I would watch him do TED Talks, and I thought, "Man, if I could go around talking to people," and I was like, I'd love to figure out a way. I mean, I thought about quitting my job at the church and going down to Earth Fair and getting a job in the grocery store because I
Mhm.
love being around it.
Mhm.
We moved from Auburn to Madison, Mississippi for a brief stint. I got involved with some plant-based groups there. I started hosting potlucks in the house, and I just thought, man, I want to figure out a way to do this. And Andre was still talking about the blog. And so I went to WordPress, got the software, kind of started looking at it. And it was originally titled From Famine to Feast, is what it was called.
Okay.
And I put a couple of things out there. But I'm such a perfectionist when it comes to my art and my presentation. It's like I just couldn't pull the trigger to get things out.
Mhm.
And my wife said, "Just put something out there." But I had no clue how to blog. I didn't know about recipe plugins or anything. And so I kind of drug it out a little bit. And in 20 in 2015 we moved back to Charlotte. Got back to Charlotte, and we were in a rental house trying to find a house to buy. And we went from famine to feast. I showed a buddy of mine. He goes, and he was a designer, and he goes, I didn't really like that. And he goes, "Sounds like a really bad youth group name from a church or something." And I was like, point taken. And then we had one called the plant-based menu or whatever. And some friends how I actually met Gigi Carter, I was talking to them about it, and they said, "Look, man," they said, "the thing that draws people to what you do is you when you talk. So it needs to be your story and the
Mhm.
recipes that came out of your story." And my wife was actually in Nashville visiting her family. And so I just was trying to think of a name for the blog. And somebody said, "Hey, Shane, thanks for sending this." They say, "I love the way you just keep it plain and simple."
Mm.
And I thought, and I called my wife. I said, "What about Shane and Simple?" And she said, and that may go back to one of the quirks, because it's like if I ask somebody a question, I don't want them to write a book. Just yes or no. Get to
Uh-huh.
the point, like I don't have time for the blah, 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 blah. So, and she goes, "That is totally you." You were to the point. Just
Yeah.
so we registered the name, and I learned how to set a blog up, learned about recipe plugins, and just kind of started. But still, it was about over a year before I made it live. And
Mhm.
I'd had this name, and we'd bought our house and settled in. It was August of 2017. And Andre goes, "Just do something." And so the first recipe was a grilled peanut butter and jelly and banana sandwich.
Nice.
And I took pictures with my iPad, and I still have the original pictures, and they're terrible, but I did it and just started trying to do it once a week, once a month, whenever I could. And fortunately it gained traction and got to a point where um that was August of 2017. And then by October of 2019, it was about half of my salary at the church I was working at. But my wife and I said, "If you're ever going to make this happen, we've got to be all in." So she picked up more work she's a graphic designer. And so the company that she gets contractors, like, "We got as much work as you want." So she picked up, and we looked at all the numbers. And she's very, like I said, she's very type A.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so I thought she's going to be like, "No, we got to have the security." But we met at a little coffee shop called Nova's Bakery, like a mile and a half up the road from us. And it was where, when I first started blogging, I'd get up and go at 5 in the morning before I'd go to the office. And we sat there that afternoon in the window, and there we were, the only two in there. NPR was playing classical music. I still remember it. Like, it was,
Yeah.
we had our little coffees, and she brought all the numbers and said, "This is what we have. This is what we need to have just to survive." And that was counting if we buy our own health insurance and everything. And we made the decision to do it in October 2019. And so December 31st was my last day at work. And yeah, fortunately, we look at it now and we go, "Oh, we made it one more month. We can do this."
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's been over 3 years, 3.5, 4 years now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love Shane and Simple. Like that is just spot on. It's such a great name, such a great blog. I love the pop up on the website that says practical, non pretentious plant based recipes. I love the non pretentious because it's like, it's so divided now. It seems you've got
Yeah.
still the vegan hippy dippy kind of scene, and then you've got a very luxurious, high end,
Yes.
very unaccessible and intimidating plant based, fare. So the non-pretentious part, did that just come at you like, I gotta put that in there? Where did that come from?
It was funny because they said every blog needs a tagline. And I've always said there's a lot of pretentious people in Charlotte. There's a lot of pretentious people in the music business. And I think it was just kind of what you said. I love alliterations if they can flow, but I just thought, you know, I kind of felt like somebody called me like the Tim Allen. You remember Tool Time?
Of
Or
course.
somebody said, "You're like the Tim Allen of vegan cooking," or something
I
like that,
love that.
like, and I thought, I guess, it's like you can be friends with everybody. And
Hmm.
like, because my friends range from the most uber conservative to off the rail liberal and progressive, and we just have a good time. And you know just everybody. And but I just thought, what I don't like is pretentiousness. And I always
Hmm.
felt like, a lot of people think that eating plant-based, and there are, it's like you said, there's this hippy dippy, and then on the other side, you've got the well-heeled elite, and it's like,
Yeah.
you can't be in our vegan circle because you don't, and so I just thought, no, I'm just a very practical person. And so I just typed it out one night: practical, not pretentious plant based recipes. And I thought, if anything, that's a good alliteration. Andre said, "That's your tagline." And I went, "Oh, you're right."
Yes.
And so that's kind of been it. And I've had more people comment about that tagline than the name, because they said, "I tried your blog just because I saw that tagline." And I thought, that's cool. So I love it. I
Very
think it
cool.
kind of pushes the button, but it seems to they seem to remember it. So.
Yes. Yes. Well, I want to touch on, when I asked you what has you inspired these days,
Mhm.
one of the things that you mentioned was vulnerability and transparency. And you've been very vulnerable and transparent telling your story here. Was there something in particular that made you write that? Is there?
You know, um, I'm a very defensive person by nature.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's one of the things. I think growing up in the deep South, we're very prideful people. And we have a very pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, blue collar work ethic. And that's good to a point. It's like, I can't afford to go buy this, but by God, I'm going to figure out how to build it. And if I'm struggling, I ain't going to tell anybody. It's like, and 2005, when I first went into ministry, the pastor that I worked for he was like a wise old sage. He just was. And creatives, musicians, there's a part of us, there's an arrogance in there, because it's like, what makes us want to be in front of people? It's like, yeah, we want to help, but there's a certain confidence that has to come with that to be able to do that, or want to do that. And I love a microphone. I love being the center of attention. But I have to realize it's not always about me. So, I, he and I would meet once a week to just kind of discuss, the layout of a service or something. And he said, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something." And I'd bring it up, and I go, "But wait, let me tell you about what really happened." He goes, he said, "Do you realize every time I just want to talk to you about something, you always try to defend yourself. You
Mm.
never just sit and listen." And he motioned his arms. He said, "Quit doing this, like pushing away." And he said, "Just sit and listen. Don't affirm, don't deny, just listen and receive." And that
Mm.
stuck with me.
Mm.
And so I went from being a guy that people didn't want to confront or talk to, because it
Mm.
was like they knew I was going to push back right off the bat, to being a guy that people said, "Hey, if Shane has hurt you or is bothering you, you can go confront him. Like he will hear you."
Mm.
And that is something that just always stuck with me. And what I saw was vulnerability and transparency. One, I think it does more to break down walls and make people feel safe with you. And it just really is an area for growth. And I feel like life is too short to kind of image manage and for the, just excuse for lack of a better term, the bullshit.
Mhm.
It's it we touch people better when they feel like we're accessible. We're able to meet them where they are. And so for me, when I talk about transparency and vulnerability, especially as a man, I don't feel like men. I think that's the biggest thing that prohibit. I feel like men don't feel safe and feel like it's
Mhm.
okay to be vulnerable and transparent because we've got to put on this thing. We got to go out and, for lack of a better word, kill something, drag it home, and we've got to be this and we've got to be that, and we don't want to ask for help. And I think, when we go back to what I was talking about when the music business got hit, like how did I handle that? I think over those years, when you look back and just some things my wife and I have gone through, we have gotten to the point where pride was just stripped away and we had no alternative but to ask for help.
Mm.
And that's what I say. I think that was some of the best lessons that came from that. And I've just seen how it has impacted my life, improved my life. And it's not just for people. I mean, it's with your kids. I mean, it's like when you do something with your kids that has hurt them or you've responded a certain way, you expect your kids to come apologize to you, but when you as a parent have to go to them and said, "You know what? I was wrong in this situation and I need you to," and that's one of the things we try to instill in our kids. We want them to be leaders, but learn to lead with repentance
Mm.
and vulnerability. That doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you get walked on, but learn to own your mistakes, learn to own your sin. And in any conflict, very rarely is it one person at fault. Now, it can be 80-20, it can be 90-10, it can be 50-50. But when you recognize what you brought to the table in that
Mm.
conflict, be the first to step out and go, "Hey, I am really sorry and I did this." And so I think just that idea of vulnerability and transparency, it strengthens us and it's just it's something that you just don't see.
Mm.
It's not very popular in our culture right now.
Absolutely.
And so it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's life-giving
Mhm.
almost, you know? It
It's
helps people.
empowering too.
It
It's
is. You're
when you
removing.
can own your stuff too and not be
Yes.
defensive, you get to take back your power in that.
Yeah, yeah, you're not giving people power over you, and it helps you not to it's not that you don't care what people think in the sense because you wanna have a good reputation, but you don't who you are is not dependent on what they
Right.
think.
Yeah.
And you're able to sleep a little bit better at
Yeah.
night, but it's a great area for growth, and it's just image managing is depressing and it is exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting, and people are smart. They can sniff out phonies in a heartbeat, and I think that, yeah, I mean, it's funny that you bring that up because, Rich McCarty, who's a doctor here, he'd been prescribing my website. He's kind of like he loves healing his patients with diet if they'll do it, and he had been prescribing my recipes for 2 or
Mm.
3 years, and one of his patients said, "Hey, I follow this guy. I think he lives in Mississippi now." And the guy goes, "No, no, no, he lives in North Carolina." He goes, "No, dude, he moved back." And it was one of the guys that was followed me religiously, and he goes,
Uh,
so he emailed me and he said, "Yeah, I live," and he's 20 minutes up the road. So we had connected and he told me, he said, he goes, "I follow a lot of bloggers." And he's on my Shane and Simple page on Facebook. He said, "You know what?" He said, "I have never seen people respond the way your people respond. Like if you put something out there that you're struggling or that, hey guys, this is going on. Sorry." He said, "It's like a little community." And I went back and I looked and I said, "It really is." I mean, it
mm.
really is. And I think it comes from that idea of trying to be transparent. Like, hey, we're all in this together. It's not just about the food, it encompasses everything we do, you know? So
Uh, Shane, I wish we had another hour, which means I might have to ask you back because we didn't even get to talk about the recipes, and I want to talk about
Oh,
your take on oil and all of this, and we are out of
yes.
time. So will you come back?
I'll tell you what. I All you have to do is give me the date and the time, and I am sorry that I talked a lot.
No, this is perfect. This was perfect. This is the stuff that fascinates me. I mean, the food part is great, but it's the story, it's the human behind the
Mhm.
recipes that I'm most interested in, and I think that our audience is, and all of this is so important for the idea of holistic health, right? That vulnerability, the transparency, the story, the resilience that you demonstrated in your life, and all that you've been through, and for you to come out and now be inspiring and helping people all over the world to get healthy and enjoy and find joy in the kitchen and with plants, and the impact you're making is huge. So
Well,
I'm
thank
so
you.
grateful and grateful
Well,
to
thank
you
you.
and your
Thank you, thank you.
story. Yeah.
Well, yes, all that to say is all you have to do is give me a date and a time because I would it'd be an honor. I mean, this is anytime we get to hang out, I'm gonna yes, yes. So
Great.
all that
Agree.
to say. So.
Awesome. We'll tell people your blog, where to find you, anything else that you want to share. Last
Yes.
words.
So shaneandsimple.com is the best place to find the recipes. Everything is free. Sign up, get the newsletter so that you never miss a new recipe. Um, you can go to the I tell people community is huge and success. So there are two Shane and Simple groups on Facebook. There's the fan page, which is just what I post, and that's facebook.com/Shane and Simple Cooking. But there's also a community, like just a group page, and you can find that. It's linked to that. But that's where I basically let everybody comment, share things. There, Instagram is Shane and Simple Cooking. Um, those are the best places to find me. I try to answer every message that comes to me. It may take 2 weeks, but I try to get back to it. I love the trying to be intentional to get all that done. So that's and then remember when I was on Chef AJ? That was awesome.
But I'm saying that people will want that recipe, and it'll be
Yes.
available on Chef
Okay.
AJ's YouTube.
Okay.
So Shane, thank you so much, and we will schedule our part 2.
That sounds great. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Ella.
You're so welcome.
Hey.